This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. This is about a system that quietly stopped working, and almost no one noticed when it did. An assumption collapsed this week. An assumption so old, so comfortable, it was treated like gravity. That when the moment came, when power was actually needed, someone would say yes. They didn't. One word, and suddenly rooms filled with experts went silent. Phones started ringing across oceans. Markets adjusted, alliances hesitated. Nothing exploded. Nothing collapsed on camera. But something essential slipped, because the danger we are facing right now doesn't look like chaos. It looks like paperwork. It looks like supply chains. It looks like energy. And if you think this has nothing to do with you, your bills, your job, your future, stay with me. Because the reason that word mattered has everything to do with what comes next. If you want to understand power before it becomes a headline, keep watching. What actually controls this system now is not a president. It's not a parliament. It's not even a treaty. It's leverage. Leverage disguised as normal trade, as routine cooperation, as things we stopped thinking about because they always seemed to be there. For decades, this continent ran on an unspoken deal. We don't need to build everything ourselves. We don't need to protect every supply line because our closest partners will always be there when it matters. That belief became policy. Policy became dependency. Dependency became invisible until the moment arrived when power was required, not promised. This is how modern power works now. Not through speeches, through inputs, through bottlenecks, through the quiet ability to say yes or not. And when that power shifts, it doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself. Slowly at first, then all at once. Because once you see who actually controls the switch, you start to understand how fragile everything built on it really is. And that brings us to what changed without anyone voting on it. There was a time when this system worked differently. Before the risk was obvious. Factories closed, pipelines failed, votes were taken. You could see cause and effect. Now, the shift happens quietly. Before, scarcity was treated as an emergency. Now it's treated as a spreadsheet problem. Before, dependence was temporary. Now it's structural. The most dangerous change didn't happen overnight. It happened through comfort, through efficiency, through the belief that integration meant safety. Industries learned they didn't need redundancy. Governments learned they didn't need patience. Everyone learned to assume cooperation instead of earning it. And slowly, the system stopped asking, what happens if the answer changes? Nothing broke when this shift happened. That's why no alarms sounded, no speeches warned you, no headlines explained it. But once a system forgets how to absorb shock, it only survives as long as no one tests it. That test has now arrived. And the first signal wasn't a crisis, it was silence. And then a refusal. The shock didn't come as an explosion. It came as a request, a phone call. Quiet, direct, not a threat, not a demand. A system asking for help from the one place it assumed would never say no. And for a moment, everything paused. Because what was being asked for wasn't symbolic. It wasn't political theater. It was material, finite, already spoken for. What followed wasn't a press conference. It was emergency briefings, sudden recalculations, phones lighting up in places that don't normally react to words. Markets noticed before the public did. So did defense planners. So did energy analysts who understand how thin the margins already are. And then came the second move, not hesitation, not compromise. Redirection. New conversations opened. New partners were named. Old assumptions were quietly bypassed. That's when this stopped being about one request. Because the refusal wasn't the crisis. It was the signal. If you're still watching, you already understand this isn't a headline story. Because the real danger isn't that someone said no. It's why they could and what that makes possible next. Here's the part most coverage misses. This system doesn't fail all at once. It redistributes damage. When access is guaranteed, costs stay hidden. When access tightens, someone pays. The question is who and how late they find out. At the top, the system still looks stable. Contracts exist. Plans remain on paper. Timelines assume cooperation that hasn't been secured. Below that, the pressure starts to move. Energy buyers compete against one another. Long-term commitments get repriced. Projects slow, not because they're impossible, but because certainty disappears. Those with leverage benefit. They can choose partners. They can demand premiums. They can wait. Those without it absorb delay. Higher costs, shorter contracts, more risk shifted downstream, and that risk doesn't stay in boardrooms. It passes through utilities, through manufacturers, through infrastructure that depends on power never blinking. The system was built on the idea that supply was neutral, that access was apolitical, that friendship was permanent. None of that is true anymore. And once a system starts rationing certainty, it never tells you where the cutoff will be. It just moves closer. Now the tempo changes. Because once certainty breaks, everything speeds up. Prices move first, quietly. Then suddenly, commitments shrink, timelines slide. Projects that were approved stop feeling real. Energy planners start making calls they hope they'd never need to make. What can be delayed? What can be downsized? What can be replaced? There are no good substitutions here. Only compromises. Power gets rerouted. Not evenly, not fairly. Some sectors are protected. Others are told to wait. Wait means cost. Cost means layoffs. Layoffs mean politics. And all of this happens without a single vote because the system doesn't collapse. It strains, and strained systems don't announce failure. They normalize it. Higher bills become seasonal. Delays become temporary. Risk becomes background noise. Until one sector pushes too far, one demand arrives too early. One assumption is tested again. And this time, the answer isn't silence. It's competition. And competition doesn't care who used to be first. This is where it reaches you. Not as policy, not as diplomacy, as math. You don't see the negotiations. You see the bill. You see electricity costs that don't come back down. You see heating prices spike and stay there longer than expected. You see businesses quietly adjusting hours, then payrolls. If you work in manufacturing, data, services, logistics, or anything that runs heavy equipment, power is not optional. It's survival. And when energy becomes uncertain, employers don't wait for clarity. They cut risk. That's how a decision made far away turns into fewer shifts, then fewer jobs. You're told it's temporary. You're told it's market forces. You're told no one could have predicted this. But the truth is simpler. The system assumes stability it no longer earns. And you're the buffer. If you're still here, it's because you can feel how close this is to your life. Because what happens next doesn't stop at borders. It moves outward. Once this shifts, it doesn't stay contained. Energy markets don't respect borders. Neither do supply chains. Neither does leverage. When one buyer loses certainty, another steps in quietly, decisively. Long-term contracts move offshore. Premium supply locks in elsewhere. What used to be regional becomes competitive. And suddenly, this isn't about one country needing power. It's about who gets guaranteed access and who doesn't. Allies start asking different questions. Not are we aligned, but who will still be there when it matters. Defense planners notice. So do governments building for decades, not election cycles. Because once energy becomes a strategic asset again, relationships are recalculated. Partnerships deepen in new directions. Old assumptions are stress tested. Coordination becomes conditional. And in that uncertainty, momentum shifts. Not dramatically, incrementally but incremental shifts compound. The world doesn't need a rupture to change course. It only needs enough friction to make alternatives feel safer. And that's where this stops being about the present. Because the future doesn't wait for resolution. It accelerates without it. From here, there are three paths forward. None of them are clean. The first is adjustment. Concessions are made, language softens. Old relationships are rebalanced just enough to restore access, not trust. Access, the system survives, but smaller, more cautious, more expensive. The second is erosion. Nothing dramatic happens, no announcement, no rupture, just continued uncertainty. Projects move slower, costs stay higher, allies diversify quietly. The system still works, but less reliably each year. This is the most comfortable path and the most dangerous because erosion feels manageable until it suddenly isn't. The third path is rupture. Access hardens into blocks. Supply becomes strategic. Energy becomes leverage everywhere, all at once. Coordination breaks under pressure. And rebuilding takes years, not months. No one chooses this path deliberately. It emerges when delay replaces decision. Right now, all three paths are open. And what determines which one we take is not ideology, not rhetoric, not even elections. It's whether this system relearns how to secure what it depends on before someone else does. There is no clean ending to this story. Not yet. Because systems like this don't fail in public. They fail in planning documents, in contracts that don't get signed, in timelines that quietly slip past relevance. What should worry you is not that someone said no. It's that saying no worked. It revealed how much of our future depends on arrangements we stopped maintaining, on trust we treated as permanent, on access we assumed could never be withheld. Nothing has broken, which is exactly why this is dangerous. Because the next test won't come as a request, it will come as a constraint. And by then, options narrow fast. If you're looking for reassurance, there isn't any here. Only a warning. Power has shifted from promises to prerequisites, from alliances to inputs. And the countries that recognize that first will define what comes next. If you want to understand where this goes before it hardens into reality, stay with this story. Share it. Push past the headlines. The next chapter won't announce itself. It will arrive quietly.